Okay, so we are at Yud Zayin Amud Aleph, 17a. So we had just read, I'll just read from the very top, that Beis Shammai says the very first word on the Yud Zayin Amud Aleph 17a1 is that you have to praise the Kala the way she is. So some say just in general, nice things, or if she has, uh, uh, let's say somebody trying to say if she has nice hair, you say she has nice hair. If she has nice eyes, say nice eyes. So I don't know if we'll see later on. You're not supposed to look at her. So how you know that? I don't know. Maybe the women tell you what to say, but either a general praise or Rashi even says according to her chashivas, according to her importance. I've spoken to several Rebbitzins who talk about how great yichus they have more than their husband's yichus. So if that's what makes them proud, so praise her for being from an important family. And it's just I don't remember if I mentioned this last week. I think I forgot to mention it. Is that when the parsha talks? Oh, here's Jeff. When the Torah talks about Rachel, which says that Rachel and Leah, when Yaakov got up there to Haran, Rachel was beautiful. Rachel was beautiful, and Leah had Ene Rakos. The eyes of Leah were Rakos. So some say, based more on a medrash, that she was crying. She thought she was going to have to marry Esav, was a Russia. So her eyes were bad, but the rest of her was beautiful. And some say no, that her eyes were very beautiful. So, if Leah wasn't according to that opinion, so there are some Rishonim who explain that they could say that Leah, that I guess Rachel overall, so just as general, Rachel was beautiful, and if Leah's eyes were her most beautiful feature, so it praised her eyes, would fit maybe according to Beis Shammai's opinion over here better. But Beis Hillel says Kala Nava Chasuda. You say it's beautiful and who has a lot of kindness towards her, the Kala. If she's physically handicapped or blind, you're going to say she's beautiful. Baruch Hashem. So I guess for if you're blind, either your eyes are don't look good or the eyes don't open, so it's not necessarily a great physical feature. So you should from words of lie you must distance yourself. That was actually in last week's parsha. So if you buy something bad, are other people supposed to pile on and tell me, yeah, you got a real lemon over there? Are they supposed to say, oh, I've heard good things about that company, try to put a positive spin on it to not make them feel bad? You should praise it. Your person's das, his mind, his thoughts, whatever that means, should be. So again, the Art Scroll here translates it, they should be mingled with people, meaning that you should say things in a way that I guess people want to hang out with you. But I think that it's from the word arev, it should be pleasant. So you should say something in a way, even though the guy may have gotten not a high quality piece of merchandise, you should try to put a positive spin on it that's not negative, but in order to make him feel okay, because you should try to be a people person and get along with people and not make him upset and not want to hear what you have to say.
So I don't know if this is addressed but I can see the rationale in all of this. Once you have either kedushin, or the actual marriage, the engagement, or whatever.
For the most part, our was talking about Nisuin, the chuppah.
Okay.
Just so you know.
But how about before somebody gets engaged?
Okay, so that's an important question.
Talk about that several years back by a rabbi because of the problems with Shivakim.
Okay, so there's a couple layers to that, maybe more than a couple, but one fact, if there's a general physical
forget physical, man.
No, that's true. No. So let me talk about. I'll get there. Okay. So if there's some type of physical defect, that always has to be disclosed, and the reason is well, the halakha, I don't remember where this Gemara is, but the Gemara says if there's a public bathhouse in that town, because if there's a public bathhouse in that town, someone at some time would have seen that she has some type of defect or handicap or whatever, so it's considered public knowledge. So I mean, not that everyone knows about it, but it's public enough, so that would have to be disclosed. So that's what the Gemara says. I forgot where, but that's what the Gemara says. So then there's a different Gemara in Kedushin that says that you're not allowed to get engaged to someone until you see her first. So, let's say Yitzchak got engaged to Rivka without seeing her, but that's not the on a rabbinic level. The rabbinic level says you're not allowed to get engaged until you see her first, because you have to see her, make sure that she looks okay to you. So then the next thing is that you're asking about, well, what about things that you can't see, or someone could put on some type of facade for a few dates, but then what happened? So nowadays, I unfortunately heard someone who is a bit of a posek and a very respected Haredi rabbi who said, and I can't believe he said that, because what he said makes him sound like a reform rabbi. He said the halacha has changed. If someone's on medication, even for a medical thing, you have to mention it. But halacha has changed from what it used to be. To say halacha has changed is a reform. Makes him into a reform rabbi to say that. What I think would be a more accurate thing to say is that people didn't realize. Well, either some of these mental related issues are being diagnosed more, or they're much more complex than people thought. And people thought, oh, you can get over it. And now we know you can't get over it, or it takes a lot of work to get over it. And therefore, and it's probably more common than it was before. And now that we know about that, it's something that must be disclosed. So it's not that the halacha changed, but we know more about the situation. It's not a perfect analogy, but smoking, they didn't know for sure that it was dangerous. But once medical things came out, Rav Aron says, now it's usher. Because now that we know it's usher, we know this information. So I would say a similar thing, if there is, if people, so I mean, but let me put something a different way. It is known that, say, certain families in the community, we know that many people from those families might suffer from depression. So there's some more functional people in the family and some less functional people in the family due to the levels of depression. Or, some people might have other certain things that either run the family or not.
There's a gray area. There's some that are more black and white.
But I think a lot of people who try to, the people who are not mental health professionals who are saying there's a little something, but it's nothing to worry about. They're not experts and they, can't make these determinations. People talk about from the Chafetz Chaim levels of what you could say, what you can't say, when it is Lashon Hara, when it's not Lashon Hara. For these things, to not be transparent is a big problem. To not be transparent. It's a huge problem.
I know somebody
Right. Okay.
We clearly knew that the person that was ready to marry somebody was not mentally stable.
Right. Yeah, it's a problem.
We had witnesses, and officially, just everybody shut mouths and.
Right, it's not good.
Get any information,
right?
And it's not even from Lashon Hara perspective. It wouldn't be a Lashon Hara perspective, but even from the fact that you're going into a marriage with someone who's not the person you think it is, that's not right from their perspective. And sometimes you have to save people; they don't know. So there's a certain other person who's mentioned this to several people in the shul. Right, the night before his wedding, people wanted to make an intervention and say, she's not stable, you shouldn't marry her. And they decided, well, they're this far already, we shouldn't. But then again, if you there's a halacha that you don't have to spend more than a fifth of your wealth. It's a machlokas if a fifth really means 20%, or if it means, I think, a little bit less than that, to fulfill a positive commandment. Like if the esrogim are super expensive and it costs $10,000 to buy an esrog, you probably wouldn't be chayav to buy an esrog that year. Most people wouldn't be chayav to buy an esrog that year. So Rav Aron said, based on a little bit of a vague Bir Hagra in Hilchos Kibbut of Aim. It says if I think if your father wants you to marry someone or your mother and you don't want to marry them, you don't have to listen to your father. And the Vilna Gaon brings 3 reasons why. One of the reasons, and it's not so clear in the Bir Hagra, but the way Varn explained it was that to fulfill mitzvah, you don't have to spend more than a fifth of your wealth. If you're going to live somewhere, if you're going to be married to someone and it's constant mental anguish is worth money, and that's probably worth more than a fifth of your wealth to go through that. I see Larry's here and Moshe's here, so to be in a situation where if you don't want to marry that person, and your father wants you to, your parents want you to marry that person, since you're the one who's going to have to live with that person, and if it's going to be constant anguish and stuff like that, from the perspective of you don't have to spend more than a fifth of your wealth, that doesn't just mean physical money, but emotional wealth is worth that too. So you wouldn't have to listen. So, unfortunately, I mean, there's a gazillion types of stories of different types of things. I mean, and some of it is because of ignorance, and some people are malicious, and they know problems and they withhold it. I'm talking about the shadchanim type people, and some people are ignorant; they don't know, they don't know. But as Rumsfeld said, there's known knowns, there's known unknowns, and there's unknown unknowns. So there aren't that many unknown unknowns, because we kind of know the different possibilities of what could happen, and but yeah, it's an issue.
Technically, all medical issues need to be disclosed, right?
Even if something would be under control, you probably should say it.
Somebody is under control, but it requires medication.
Right. Yeah. It should be disclosed, whether it's physical or whether it's emotional or mental or whatever. I mean, we had a case, the guy, he disappeared. He was a little bit unbalanced. Normally it was under control, and for whatever reason, for one point it got not under control, and people were saying, yeah, if anyone sees this guy, he's missing. But the Chachamim, they didn't say who to call. So I knew someone who was very closely related to a good friend of this guy, and someone told me on the East Coast, he said, "Do you know this guy is, why this guy is here?" I'm like, "Where is?" I immediately called. I said, "Where?" He put it on a chat, and I said, "Where do you see him?" So I immediately called this other person. I said, "This guy was just, it didn't say who to let know, and I mean, and his wife said, as long as he takes his medicine, he comes back, that's good. Whether that he was under that situation when he had gotten married 15 years before that, I don't know. But yeah, it's a very important issue, and it's a problematic issue because of either the people who are not honest, or people who say, people ask the question, they say, "Oh, there's nothing," but they're not in position to know necessarily. And then, I guess HIPAA has made things a little bit. I mean, you can't ask the person's doctor because they can't answer it. If they're the doctor, but yeah, it's a real issue. Kiyasu Rav Dimi, so we're on the 8th line from the top of Yud Zayin Amud Aleph. When Rav Dimi came from Eretz Yisrael to Bavel, he said, "Hachimashu kamekasa b'marava." This is how they sing in front of Kala in Eretz Yisrael in the west. Lo chav lo strak lo pirchos v'yalas chein. She doesn't need makeup or other type of makeup or fancy hair, but she gives favor or grace. So meaning she's beautiful even without any of this. She doesn't need any of this other makeup and fancy stuff. When the Rabbanan gave smicha to Reb Zera, they gave the following song: the same thing that they gave to Akala. So why? So what's probably an incorrect explanation is that the relationship we have with Torah is similar, because there's a drasha Al Tikra something Ella Arusa. We kind of have a close relationship with Torah, like we're engaged to it. So one thing you'd say that Reb Zera had such a close relationship to Torah is like engaged, so they kind of said the praise they gave to the Kala. That's something you could say is probably not the true shot. Rav Aaron mentioned that well in general, but certainly for Talmud Chacham, and it's also for this week's parsha. Rabbi Eugene was, and I'll tell you how Rabbi Eugene said it over. But Rav Aaron said, you can't pretend to be someone you're not. If you're wearing fancy makeup and this and the eye makeup and the other makeup and the fancy hair, you look like someone you're not. But a Rav can't pretend to be someone they're not. I mean, most people shouldn't pretend to be someone they're not either, but specifically a Rav. So that's what they praise Rav Zera. The way Rabbi Eugene would have worded it, not that I heard Rabbi Eugene talk about it, but it's from this week's parsha, Truma, building the Mishkan, that the Aaron was 3 boxes, a wood box inside of a gold box inside of a wood box. Excuse me, opposite. Gold on the inside, gold on the outside, and wood in the middle. So you couldn't have it gold on the outside and wooden on the inside. Rabbi Eugene mentioned because you have to be a Talmid Chacham has to be tocho kaboro. Your inside has to be like your outside. You can't put on a facade, pretend to be something you're not. So whatever material was the inside of the Aaron had to also be the outside of the Aaron. So that it's the same idea. And in other rabbinic literature, they talk you can't be achas b'pev achas b'leiv. Like politicians, this story was with Rabbi Yaakov Emden. He couldn't understand what the word politica means. He looked up in the dictionaries and stuff, and it said politics is someone that the politician does. And what's a politician? Someone who's engaged in politics. So it was a circular thing. So he read a bunch of stuff about things. And then to define politician, he said someone who says one thing and means something else. So in Hebrew, we call it achas b'pev, achas b'leiv. They're one thing in the, well, this is 200 and something years ago. So one thing in the mouth and one thing in the mind. So that's not what you, so they're praising Reb Zera that I guess he was, and he should continue to be, what you see is what you get, in a good sense. When the Rabbanan gave smicha Reb Ami and Reb Asi, they gave them the following song: anyone like these and like these, you should give smicha to us. Lo tismchu lanu lo min sarmisin v'lo min sarmitin, and don't give smicha to sarmisin or sarmitin. So Rashi, sarmisin seems to be Rashi says that you mix things around. So you like say halacha, but you give the wrong reason. And smartitin is from the word of rags. Rashi, I mean, the Art Scroll translate is distorters, which I guess, saying the wrong reason is a form of distortion. But Amri Lahu, and some said that the song that they said was Lo mi chamisin v'lo min tormisin. So a chamus, so there's a couple explanations. So chamis might be like, even though it's a samach, it might be like a shin. A chamish, a fifth. So Rashi says they're only giving a fifth of the reason. They're not giving the full reason. And tormisin, he doesn't know what it means. But then there's a different explanation in Rashi, whether it's for Rashi or not. Trying to get no goodness involved, I guess. So chamisin, I first said Rashi says it's someone who explains 1/5. Art Scroll, if you see it translated with holder, so the halacha is if theft is theft, but then there's something called chamas. So chamas might say, I'm buying this from you, and so they give it to him, and then they don't pay for it. So a case like that, well, or similar things, you're ended up taking something you shouldn't have taken, something like that. So chamas is something like that. So I think that's what we're talking about with holder, and it would mean probably not giving a reason for something, for a psak or whatever. Okay, Rabbi Bo have also once we're on this tangent about certain praises. Rabbi Bo have a asim imsiftel be Kesar, when Rabbi Bo would leave the yeshiva and go to the Caesar's house. Nafkan am hasad be Kesar apei mashmin lehachi. The women servants of the Caesar's house would come out to greet him, I guess, and sing the following: Rabbi Da'ame, a leader of his people, Medbarar Lumase, and a leader. We're on 17A1, the second column. right before the end of the second paragraph. Botzina dinahora, the wick of the candle, or bright as a candle. Brich ma'isach l'shalom, blessed are you that you came in peace. Okay, back to our topic. Amr l'hu alav Rabbi Shimon, Rabbi Yehuda ben Eli. They said about Rabbi Yehuda ben Eli, Shayanotel bachel hadas m'rak lifnei akala. He would take a branch of a hadas and dance in front of the kala of Amr kalanava chasuda, and he would say, "A beautiful bride and chasuda." So, first of all, and which is overlooked, he's passing like Beis Hillel, which is no surprise because you're always passing like Beis Hillel. But in addition, he would take a hadas. And Reb Shmuel bar Yitzchak Meraket Atlas, Reb Shmuel bar Yitzchak would dance with 3 hadasim. It seems, according to Rashi, he was juggling them. An Amar Reb Zera. Okay, so before that, so the juggling thing, at least nowadays, is used. You do shtick or things like that. I don't know if he did it for shtick because in the Simchas Beis HaShoeva, they also seem to have some people who were juggling torches of fire. So it was some type of special thing. What might be more likely, it wasn't shtick, but it was a certain skill that on special occasions people would do it. It wasn't done specially. So in certain weddings, it doesn't really happen anymore. They have a badchin who gives some type of jokes. Or with something that's more often, you have a Purim spiel. When do you have a Purim spiel? Once a year. Some people want to make jokes all year round, but then it cheapens it. So Purim is the one time a year you have the spiel and you have the joke, so it's a special occasion. So juggling they did, but they saved it for special occasions. Simchas Beis HaShoeva, perhaps for the wedding. Now what's with the hadas? I'm not sure. I was thinking about it, and we know that hadas smells good. So I believe the Medrash about in Parshas Emor about the Arba Minim. I think it's that the hadas, it smells good, means you're full of ma'asim tovim. But also there's a Gemara in Shabbos by Rav Shimon bar Yochai when he left the cave with his son. So first time he went out of the cave, he saw people just working at stuff, and there was a fire that came up. He couldn't understand any connection to the physical world after the 7 years in a cave, just learning and focusing on spiritual matters. So then the Baskel said, go back to the cave. They went in for another year, came out, and again, but he saw someone taking 2 hadassim, and he says, why are you taking this? He says, for Shabbos, I'm having one for Zachor and one for Shamar, and then Rishon Bar Yochai, he didn't burn anything up anymore. So in that Gemara, I guess part of it was we have to use physical things towards spiritual things, and he was honoring Shabbos. Whether that's the source that we buy flowers for Shabbos or not, I'm not sure. It might be, but so whether hadas was the general thing, maybe hadas there's some inner, more deeper meaning. Sure, whether because it smells good, which represents people who do mitzvos or people who are kind to others, or maybe in regard, it wouldn't explain for Shabbos. But actually, it could because we talk about the Shabbos queen, so almost like a bride. Hashem gave us a Shabbos or Eretz Yisrael, almost like a dowry or something. So a comparison between a Kala and a Shabbos isn't actually so far fetched. What you might do for one, you might do for the other. Maybe it represents tznius because Anaf Eitz Avos, the way that the Torah mentions about hadas, they mention that the lower leaf, should go and cover the bottom of the next leaf. So actually the branch itself, you don't see the branch of the hadas. So if it's something like that, it might represent tznius, which we understand more for a kala than for Shabbos. But, whether there's a deeper meaning, there might be. Okay, so now we're at the top of 17a2 in the art scroll. So in regard to Reb Shmuel bar Yitzchak, who was juggling the 3 hadassim, Amar Reb Zera says, Kamachsif Lasava, the older one is embarrassing us, Kinach Nafsh, meaning that either that he's overdoing it, and we should be doing things like that to be Misameach B'chas and Kala, or maybe he was being slightly critical that, it's not, maybe he's going a little bit overboard, and it's not with respect appropriate with his stature to be doing that. And when it said embarrassing, it was embarrassing to the Rabbanim as a whole. And for the next line, you'll see why I'm giving this explanation, because when he died, there was a pillar of fire that separated between his remains and everyone else. And we have a tradition that this fire doesn't separate between the remains and everyone else except once in a generation or a second generation. So obviously he was a tremendously great person if that happened. So then Reb Zera said after that happened, Ahanyale Shutisa Lasava. The Shutisa, which is an Aramaic name for a different Aramaic name for a Hadass. I think another name for a Hadass is an Asa. Aleph Samach Aleph. That this Hadass branch helped the elderly one. Va'amrile Shtuse Desava, and some say that the Shtus, the foolishness, helped him. Va'amrile Shitase Lesava. His opinion or his shita, normally say a shita is an opinion, but a shita could be a certain approach that he had. So this approach of dancing afforded this. So Reb Zera, for whatever reason, understood that this fire coming out was because of his adat. So I think Tosfos mentions here, how did he know that? Yeah, Tosfos asks, how did Reb Zera know that Reb Shmuel here merited this because of this particular thing? So so Tosfos suggests that the pillar of fire was in the shape of the Hadass. So the way I explained what Reb Zera said before, Reb Zera was a little bit critical, not in a harsh way, but he was a little critical of what Reb Shmuel had done. But then once this happened, he had to say, no, it was a very great thing that he did, because in the merit of the way that he danced with and juggled the Hadass, it was a big zchus for him. Rav Acha would lift the kala up on his shoulders and dance. Amri le Rabbanan anan mahu lemebet hachi. They said, are we allowed to do this? If she's like a beam, then you can be low, but if not, not. So the problem is, that you shouldn't touch a woman if you're not married to her. So how would he pick her up like that? So if he was saying that for him, he didn't feel like he was picking up a person, so it didn't cause any improper thoughts. If you look in the footnotes here, the art scroll brings up a very important point, a thing called a mitzvah tans that Hasidim do. What they have the kala comes onto the man's side. She's the only one there. She's wearing a thick towel. No one can see her. No one over her face, not just a veil, but it's completely opaque, thick. And they take a long gartel, and she just stands there, and the Rabbi does something holding the gartel the other end. It's like a 30-foot gartel. So for them, it's like the highlight of the wedding, and for a lot of people, you'll go look in the footnotes there for sources that it is not such a great thing. Now, once someone on the internet put on a great thing that they had the kala was in the Ezra Nashim upstairs, and they had a long gartel going through the window, meaning in davening. So that's probably not such a bad thing, because she's not even she's in a completely different room. That's probably a better way to do a mitzvah tans. But why is it such a big part of their culture? I have no idea.
Why or how, if it was like that through the window, but and my Mapatan were just in Israel for Eichenstein's daughter got married to a bigger cousin, and there were 1,000 people, and he said 10,000, I don't know. Anyway, he said the mitzvah tans was half an hour. Unbelievable.
But how many rabbis went dance? It was just her father or her grandfather, or it was other big rabbis also?
Were at the wedding?
No, did the mitzvah tans?
Oh, I don't know. I didn't.
I'm just saying it may not necessarily. Right? Yeah. Don't ask, don't tell.
Right.
Okay. Amr Shmuel bar Nachmani, Amr Yonasan. Mutter listalkel b'fnei kala kol shiva. You could look in the face of the bride all 7 days. Kidei lachava va'abayla, to make her dear to her husband. Her husband says, oh, everyone's looking at her, she must be pretty, and he's more happy with her as a wife. But we do not paskin like him, because we paskin, they're not even supposed to look at a little finger of a woman. The Rosh brings down an opinion, I think he rejects it, that you could do it the first day, because he brings out an interesting point. But I don't remember if the Gemara talks about this later. but the Russia's point, he mentions that because we're talking about we need someone to testify if she came out with the special veil or the special thing that proves that she's a basula. So if you're not allowed to look at her, how do you know? So he brings an opinion that you saw from the back that the thing was, in her hair, but you didn't actually see her face. You saw from the back, and that's what the Rush mentions. Or he seems to say that for this, so the second answer is that you either see it from, let's say, the back, maybe, or you see that the hair, but you don't actually see her face. But the first answer is saying you saw that the hemna, which maybe the Gemara is going to say later, I don't think we're going to get there today, that if it was this woven hadass canopy type thing, if you see the canopy, you didn't see it was over her, but you saw the canopy, and they said that was Shmiralet. I usually say Shmir Barrel, but this was Rachel's thing. That's enough to testify in regard to this halacha. That you don't literally have to see it on her, but if that was the word going around, you can testify to that. Tana Rabbana, we learned in the Brayso, you move away a mace in front of a kala. So if the kala is there, it seems that you're supposed to, if they were going to, if a funeral procession was going and the kala, the funeral procession would stop to allow the kala to go to the wedding hall. But both a kala and a mace have to stop their way if the king of Yisrael comes. They said about King Agrippus, that Agrippus, when he had met the bridal party traveling, the Kala's group, he actually stopped in front of her. And Chachamim praised him. So whether Agrippus had a full status of a malach or not, it's probably not. We mentioned a week or two ago about King Herod and stuff. So Agrippus was probably not. Well, there were two Agrippuses, and certainly one of them was not the Jewish because of his mother was from the slave side. But without talking about that, the Chachamim praised him. So then the Gemara says, Shabchu, they praised him. Michlal the Shaper Abed, it implies they praised him because he did something good. But Ravashi says, even according to the opinion that a Nasi, the prince, or the head of the Beis Din, if he's due certain honor, if he says, you don't have to do it for me, you don't have to show him that special honor, except a melech shemachal kvodo ain't kvodo machal. If a king says you don't have to do that honor to me, you can't listen. You still have to honor the king, even if he doesn't want it. The Amar, because we learned in the Brayso, som tasim alechem melech. The pasuk in Shoftim says you shall surely appoint a king upon you. Shetei masu alecha. How come it says som tasim, put in a double lashon to show that he must have awe? Everyone must be in awe of him. So even if Agrippus wanted to give respect to the Kala, he wasn't allowed to relinquish and to be mochel on his own respect that they had to show him. So again, according to some opinions, he wasn't a real melech. So according to that, it wasn't. He treated him like a king. He was a king, but halachically he couldn't be the king because of his the yichus on his mother's side. But at this stage, for whatever reason, the Gemara is assuming that it was a regular malch. So the Gemara answers prashas drachim habu. It would happen at what we would call an intersection. So because he was able to turn a different way, so he didn't stop for the bride, but he detoured, even though he didn't really need to detour. So it wasn't a case where it was considered that he was not giving himself or allowing the respect that he was due to have happened, because he made it look like he was going in a different direction. So then he didn't disrupt the bridal party. Tana Rabbanan, we learned in the Brayso, so you have to interrupt learning Torah for a funeral. to take out a body for burial, achnasas kala, and also to bring the kala to the wedding. Amr lava Rabbi Yehuda Rabbi Eloi. They said about Rabbi Yehuda ben Eloi that he would interrupt his Torah study for funerals and for the kalas. But when do you have to interrupt that if there's not enough honor for the deceased individual? But if there's enough for the person's honor, then you don't have to interrupt your Torah. But what's considered the honor of this deceased person? Amar Shmuel bar Ini Mishmei Derav, Tracer Alfei Gavri, Veshita Alfei Shipure. 12,000 men and 6,000 Shipure. Article translated as shofar blowing. Rashi doesn't, I don't know if it's from the word Shipure. He says people who are announcing about it for them to come. For Amrile, and some said, Tracer Alfei Gavri Minayu Shita Alfei, 13,000 men, and of those 13,000, 6,000 of these either announcers or people with shofar. So obviously, it's very hard to get that many people for average funeral. Amar Ula Amar, and Ula says, you have a group of people lining the road from the end of the city to the funeral to the cemetery, because the cemeteries used to be outside the city. So if there'd be a line of people from the edge of the city to the cemetery, that's considered called sarfa. Sheshis v'tema Rav Yochanan Amar netilaso k'nisinaso. Sheshis and some say Rav Yochanan says taking away is like giving it. Manas inaso b'shishim ribo after netilaso b'shishim ribo. Just like the Torah was given with 600,000 people, taking away is also 600,000 people. So this makes it sound like we're talking specifically about the funeral for a Talmid Chacham. Well, yeah, we'll see why actually, because the Gemara is going to say a few more lines. The Vahani Mili Lamai de Karvatani. That's true about someone who read a Tanakh and Mishnayos. No, he's turned to Amid Beis. Laman Damasni Lesli Shiura. But to someone who taught Torah publicly, there's no shear of how many people are considered his honor. So from this line, the previous phrase about needing the 600,000 people, so that's specifically talking about a Talmid Chacham. Even though the Gemara didn't say it beforehand, okay, so 2 dots on top of Yud Zayin Amar Aleph on the first line. If there's witnesses that she came out with the Hinuma, then she gets a Kesuva of 200 because she's assumed to be a Basula. So my Hinuma, what is this Hinuma? Surchav Bar Papa Mishmei Deziri Amar. So I think this is one, it's when we have a Sia and we have the Bar Papa. So here's Surchav Bar Papa. So we don't, they're spread out all over the place here, but here is, in the, I think we have Chanina, Rami, Nachman, Achoy, Abamari, Rafram, Rachish, and Surchav, Ada, and Dara. So the third to last Bar Papa is Surchav, who is in our Gemara right here. So I guess Emir Tashem will make us see, and we'll able to say Sorcha Bar Papa to know a statement of Torah that Sorcha Bar Papa taught when we say the Hadron, when we finish Kesuvos, and then do more Masechtas and know the other Bar Papas also. Tanura de Asa, it's a round myrtle canopy from Hadass. Rabbi Yochanan Amar Krisa de Mamna Ba Kalsa. It's the veil in which the Kala takes a doze, takes a nap. So Rashi says not necessarily that she can, but because like her face is covered, people wouldn't notice if she was taking a nap or not. So sometimes, obviously, maybe because of her excitement, she wasn't sleeping so well, she might actually take a nap. So it's not necessarily that she takes a nap in it, but it's something that she might sometimes take a nap in. So if people say that she came out either with that myrtle, hadass canopy, or that special veil, then that's enough of a testimony to say that her ksuva was 200 zuz as a psula. Rabbi Yochanan ben Broka Omar, Rabbi Yochanan ben Broka says if they gave away the toasted wheat, Tana b'Yehuda Raya. So it's a proof if it was in Yehuda, but Bavel Mai. But in Bavel, what do we know? Because in Yehuda we don't give away this toast. In Bavel we don't give away this toasted grain. So what's a simon that in Bavel that she was a psula? Rav said they're gui de mishcha reishi derabana. If they rub oil on the head of the chachamim, that's what they did when a psula was getting married. You're talking about the regular oil to wash your hair with? Amarle Yasma. So Yasma literally means orphan, but he's saying, you have issues if you don't know what we're talking about over here. Lo Abdullah Ima Darguge Mishka Reisha Darban Bishas Maisa. Your mother didn't rub oil on the heads of the Chachamim when you got married. I mean, Bishas Maisa just means at the time, but it means when you got married. There was a certain rabbi the Iske Libre Bar Bay Rabba Bar Ula that he arranged the wedding for his son with the daughter of Rabba Bar Ula. Va'amrila Rabba Bar Ula Yasik Libre Be'ahum Rabbanan, or some say it was the son of Rabba Bar Ula. Excuse me, that Rabba Bar Ula, the son of Rabba Bar Ula with the daughter of this other rabbi. The Dargi Mishcha Reish Rabbanan Bishas Ma'isa, and oil was rubbed on the heads of the Chachamim during the wedding. So there's one of my favorite stories that's in one of the first two Maggid books, is that Rabbi Zalman Meltzer, so he had been the Rosh Yeshiva, he was Hamid of Chaim, and he was Rosh Yeshiva, I forgot, in Slutsk. I think he was Rav of Slutsk. And then Rav Aaron Cutler was his son-in-law, but then Rabbi Zalman made Aliyah and went to Eretz Yisrael a long time ago, and he lived a very, very long life. And everyone in Eretz Yisrael who was anyone learned in his yeshiva called Eitz Chaim. And Rabbi Zalman, I think it was Rabbi Zalman. No. This story wasn't with Rabbi Zalman. No, I think I'm mixing up. It wasn't with the Rabbi Zalman. But basically, Yerushalmi, this is 100 years ago, maybe a little more. Got married, and right before Pesach, he's in his in-laws' house, and there's wheat kernels in the soup, chametz gamur. And so they gave him another bowl of soup, and there's more wheat. And they went to whoever it was, maybe it was Rav Zalman, but I think it was Rav Zalman. And Rav Zalman said, "You got married, a couple of weeks ago, right, or last week?" He said, "Yeah." He said, "Give me your hat." And the Yerushalmis, it wasn't a full what we would call a shtreimel, but it was a semi-shtreimel. And he went like this, and all this wheat is falling out. He says, "We throw wheat at the wedding, and before you criticize someone else, check your own shtreimel." In those days, they didn't have rice. At least not there. Where they have grown the rice. So they threw wheat, and the wheat was in his shtreimel, and it fell from his shtreimel into the soup. But the in-laws didn't do anything wrong. And Rav Zalman was a big, gentle person, but the way the story is given over, he said that sharp line to that chassan. Armel Tamai. So what do they do at a wedding of a widow? Obviously, we don't do these things, but we have to do something special. So we say widow again. That would include someone who had been divorced. Tani Rav Yosef, Armel Taleis like Kisroi. If you don't have this the wheat, so it's a little bit strange that the absence of something being a simon, because normally you'd have to do something to be a sign. The absence of something isn't a sign, but that's what Rav Yosef said. Okay, a few more lines. Rabbi Yeshua agrees if someone told your friend, "This field used to be your father's, but I bought it," that he's believed. So the Gemara says, "V'lisnei motor Rabbi Yeshua, but Omer Chavero Sodei Zu Shalcha Yisol Kachtei Mincha." How come it says that the case was he said this was your father's field, but I bought it from him? Why does it say it was your field and I bought it from you? How come he's not believed in that case? So the Gemara says, because we have to know the second part of the Mishnah. If there's witnesses that it was once his, if there would have been witnesses that it was this guy's field, and then he's not the other guy's not believed to say, "I bought it from you." He's only believed if he says it was your father's and I bought it from him. But he wouldn't be believed if he said, "I bought it from you," if there would be witnesses. Because, hey, Chidami, what's the case? If this new guy, the one who owns it now, had his years of chazaka. Now, chazaka is usually, we say it's 3 years of working the field, living in it. Amai lo meheman. Why wouldn't he believe if he had chazaka? And if he didn't use the field for 3 years and show ownership that way. Certainly he's not believed. So what's the case? So the Gemara then says, "Ihachi gabi aviv nami." But if we're bringing chazaka into the picture, if he said it was your father's field, but I bought it from him, we should also need chazaka in that case. If he already had it for 3 years, why isn't he believed? And if he didn't have the years of chazaka, he wouldn't be believed either. So how come in this case we seem to say not need any chazaka? It's just to say if it was your father's field, he is believed. So then the Gemara says, Bishlam Agabi Aviv, we can understand when the claim was in regard to this other person's father, it was your father's field, when he for 2 years when the father was still alive, he started having chazaka, but then the father died. And now the 3rd year of his chazaka was the first year that it was in the son's ownership, because it passed to him in Yerusha. Rav Huna, according to Rav Huna, the Amar Rav Huna says, "Ein machziki b'nichsei katan afilu higdil." We cannot use chazaka with property of a minor, even if the minor grew up. So here, so therefore we can't have chazaka. Rav Huna masnisan asalash meinan. But then the Mishnah is telling us the same thing of Rav Huna. So what's Rav Huna teaching us? Something we already know from a Mishnah. So ibay sema Rav Huna diuka de masnisan kamar. So either it's not explicit in the Mishnah. Rav Huna deduced it from the Mishnah, so he said it explicitly for people who weren't able to deduce it from the Mishnah. From the Mishnah, we may have only assumed it was if this kid was still a minor. But if the kid would have grown up, he should have complained. We're going to see more about this next time. But Rav Huna is saying even if the kid was a gadol, was an adult, Kamash Malan, we still, that chazaka still does not work. And that's, we wouldn't have learned that from the Mishnah, so he's adding that detail. So we'll leave it here. The very first wide line on Yud Zayin on the base for next week.